Let's talk about the archetype of one of our favorite character in Desperate Housewife, which is Gabrielle Solis, Body 2000 Latina Mommy. Okay, let's talk about Gabrielle Solis, which is essentially representing the archetype of the sovereign queen, and her husband Carlos Solis is also representing the archetype of the sovereign king. So let's talk about that. The archetype in itself here, we are seeing here that Gabby, she's very selfish, she's very arrogant, very vain, and the fact that she's embodying this energy, which is led to her ego and the representation of her inner wounded masculine energy, we're seeing here that she's very much finding this very difficult for her to learn how to be humble, because she grew up very, very poor. She was raised by a mother that was very much competing with her, also shaming her in regard of the relationship that she had, and the men were always trying to seduce her, which means that she was carrying those trauma here in regard of being seen as a sexual object. Okay, so when it comes to her husband, she met him while she was being a model, very much interested in her because of her appearance, because of her beauty, because of her sex appeal. And the relationship here was sort of kind of like imbalanced, because it wasn't necessarily seeing her for who she was on the inside. It was very much seeing her as the trophy wife, and every time he wanted to win any sort of deals, it was bringing her along with him so that she could seduce the bosses or anyone he was trying to work with. So the disrespect was already there, and that's why she essentially felt like empty on the inside, because it wasn't able to really see her. She got caught up in a relationship with her gardener, which is very much not to be glamorized. So she managed to sort of kind of remove herself from that relationship, but that created a lot of strain in her relationship with others, and also the relationship with her husband in the first place. Her husband wanted to have a baby, but she did not want to have a baby because of her mother wounds, and also because she did not want to damage her body and her beauty. So that was her fear. They were very much mirroring each other's energy, because their energy was so similar. It was very much like her in a male body, and she was him in a female body. That's why they kept on coming back towards one another. But Carlos ended up cheating on her with the maid, because he was attracted to the fact that she was carrying their baby. So it's just like a bunch of mess here. They had to go through a very, very big tower moment here, which was losing their money, because the biggest issue here was materialism, desire, and all of those energies here that are very, very toxic here. Both wanted to live a really beautiful lifestyle, but a lifestyle at what price? She essentially divorced him, and they had a big fight here. They had to really remove themselves from this energy that was very materialistic. They were just using each other for statue, for her, she was the prize, and him, he was essentially the provider for her. But she wasn't emotionally content, she wasn't emotionally satisfied, hence why she kept on cheating on him. The beautiful thing about Gabrielle Solis here is that she was very much carrying this dark feminine energy, which means that even when she found herself to be single, she managed to level up financially and found an even better provider than her first husband, Carlos. Okay, but the provider that she found was very much worse, was actually worse than Carlos. Okay, it was very much worse than Carlos, because he would do anything to keep his reputation clean, up to the point where he was actually capable of doing no worse. Okay, which was a crazy lesson for Gabby, because she really realized, like, am I selling my soul for money? Like, am I selling my soul to, have this provider that actually doesn't respect me? She had to go through that same lesson where she actually cheated on, her second husband, which was the mayor, to go back with Carlos, which had created so many different time moments in drama. Okay, he had to learn how to love her for her soul, because he couldn't really see her anymore. So she lost herself. She had a big ego death. So was he. He also had a big ego death. They had to learn to love each other without the money, without the finances, without the material. And they were able at the end, because they proved themselves to show love and loyalty to one another. They were able to heal that energy and get back to the money and get back to the lifestyle. Because if there's something about Gabby, she knows how to make decisions that are extremely selfish, but to the benefit of her and her family. And what really broke my heart essentially is that, she lost her baby, and the motherhood part of it was very, very heartbreaking when it comes to Gabby. And I feel like that was her biggest lesson. That really broke my heart when she received that really horrific news of, knowing that her daughter was actually switched at birth. And when she met her daughter, the resilience that she had in regard of nurturing so many emotions. And then at the end, she lost her daughter again. And I thought that was like really, really sad. She actually, had to say goodbye to her daughter, which actually turned out to be her biggest dream, in regard of being a mother. And she really tried to be the best mother that she could. And she ended up buying a doll that looked like her biological daughter, and I thought that was so touching. Gabby is such a beautiful archetype. Okay, she's very much driven in regard of her wounded ego, but over time she managed to learn how to balance it, and also being able to tap into her light feminine energy, which is being the mother, being vulnerable, and also being loving, and show the depth that she truly has, because it wasn't just about the physique here. Her dependence in regard of just showing beauty and lifestyle and all that stuff, but really being genuine and sincere. And I've seen over the seasons when her and her husband went back together and they learned that lesson, they integrated that lesson. Carlos became such a great husband in regard of treating Gabby in a way that she wanted to be treated. It felt like she was much more comfortable around them, and it's just like this beautiful energy of those two mirroring each other. As she changes and elevates, he does the same, and that's really is the meaning of divine partnership in itself here. So that was a beautiful way to really explain one of the archetype here of the divine feminine and the divine masculine energy. I thought that was a very beautiful way to really teaching here that money is just not enough for a successful relationship, happiness, because you can have a provider, but where is the emotional side of it? Like, are you feeling content emotionally, etc.? So let me know what you think about Gabrielle Solis, and let me know who else you'd like for me to talk about down below in the comments. Okay, all right, bye.